Thank you, Mona, and welcome everybody. Well, it's a pleasure for me to talk to you and I guess try and convince you that you should work in renewable energy engineering. And one of the best ways to do that is to do a degree, of course, in that field. And at University of Tasmania, we offer a couple of fantastic options. So firstly, a little bit about myself. I am an electrical engineer and I've worked in renewable energy and power systems research and teaching and industry for the last 25 years. And I really love working in this field, especially now where things are just changing really rapidly. And if you asked me 20 years ago whether we needed lots of young people to get into electrical power engineering, I probably would have said, no, not really. But whenever anyone asks me now, I say, do it, because you're probably aware, it's hard not to be aware that around the world, everyone is moving away from fossil fuels towards low carbon energy technologies. And the part of the energy system that is leading the way is the electrical power system. That's where a large fraction of our energy is delivered from power stations through electrical wires to the household or to businesses. And it is moving towards renewable energy, solar and wind in particular, really, really quickly. But there's a whole lot of work that has to be done, and it's probably going to take place, and I don't know I could guess at the average age of the participant, it's probably going to take place over the next 3 to 4 decades, which is most of your working lives. And there's some really exciting opportunities there. And so for anyone that when I teach them, when they come here and I teach them, the first thing I say is congratulations on choosing this pathway, because the opportunities really are limitless once you've graduated with an engineering degree. I live and breathe energy and power systems. I'm very enthusiastic about it. And a lot of my colleagues here are as well. And I think you'll see that if you come and learn from us here. So why renewable energy? Well, as I said, economies around the world are all transitioning towards something that doesn't pollute the atmosphere with carbon dioxide. You're all acutely aware of the risks of not doing anything to combat climate change. And energy systems, as I said at the start, really is the most likely to cause a big impact in reducing carbon dioxide emissions. And renewable energy engineers will do a lot of work in making that happen and having that transition to a sustainable future. And just a few examples here of the types of things that engineers will do to help. So one is developing new renewable energy technologies and enabling technologies. And by renewable energy technologies, well, the photo here that you see is looking down at some solar panels. And some of you might be able to see behind me here, I've got a solar panel in my office here. And they've been around for some time, but there's a huge amount of work still going into making the panels themselves operate more efficiently, and systems, when they're installed, operate better so that they produce more power, more output. And then when we say enabling technologies, that can mean a whole host of things. But the first one you might think of, and this is, I remember working in renewable energy 10 or 15 years ago, and people said, but the sun doesn't shine at night, so that's no good. And the answer, which we knew then, but was very expensive, and which we now know is commercially viable in many locations, is to store that energy. And we can store it in batteries, or we can store it by pumping water uphill and then letting it run downhill later. In fact, I'll come back to that, but that's one of the things which Tasmania is actually famous for, is generating electricity from water running downhill. All of our power is supplied by, almost all of it, by hydroelectricity. And that is threaded into the courses that you would do here at the University of Tasmania. So energy, developing those technologies is one thing. Designing and building projects is where a lot of activity is at all around the world. I had a look at the participant list and I saw, well, I guessed at some different nationalities. I can tell you that in India, solar is being installed at huge rates. In China, solar and wind at really high rates. In fact, China has installed more solar and wind in the last few years than any other country has. Every country you go to that you would work in is installing projects, big solar and wind projects, and now big energy storage projects. And that's going to happen for the next 20, 30, 40 years at least. And then you may have heard of smart grids, some of you, and some of you may even in your household or in a building that you've worked in have had some element of smart grid in your household. That is, maybe you've got a solar system on your roof and you've got some monitoring which helps you control how much energy you use in the house. Maybe it communicates back to the provider of electricity so they know how much energy you're using. And there's a whole lot of technology that hasn't been developed yet or is just being developed to help manage all of those hundreds and thousands of renewable energy generation devices, batteries in people's homes, electric vehicles. One of my favorite things to teach in the degrees is how electric vehicles work and how they can in future be used to help manage the electrical power system. Electric vehicles, some very, very cool features which you will learn about if you do a degree in electrical engineering and renewable engineering. But all of these things have to be tied together to make a really complex system work. Someone once said that the electrical power system is one of the most complex man-made systems, and it's very large. They span thousands of square kilometers and lots of different technologies, and they have to be managed to be operating every second in a nice, stable way. They're actually quite complicated systems, and we're making them more complicated. And so there's more and more technology needed to manage these systems well. And then the last point here is probably the one which is the newest. Once we've solved the problems of making our electricity system all renewables based, then other energy intensive sectors need to start looking at how they reduce their carbon footprint or the amount of emissions that they produce. I already touched on one with electric vehicles, but transport. Transport is just another part of the energy system, and there's huge opportunities to electrify transport, to create hydrogen to fuel transport and make that renewable hydrogen, to make renewable ammonia to power shipping, to make light transportable fuels for aviation. That's just in transport. Then other industries like producing cement and glass and steel and other metals, those all produce carbon dioxide, but there's a lot of opportunities for engineers. And in this case, not just electrical engineers, but a lot of other engineers as well and scientists to help make that transition. And so if you do a degree at UTAS in renewable energy and power systems, you'll get not only the skills and knowledge in a lot of these areas, but the broader understanding of what's required over those coming decades. This, I think, exciting transition. Mona, maybe I should have said earlier on, I'm quite happy if I'm able to see them, if people want to ask questions as I'm talking, I might be able to see them and answer them as we go. Otherwise, of course, we'll address them at the end.
No worries, Evan. There's nothing through at the moment. And yes, definitely for the audience, feel free to pop in any questions as we go.
Yeah. So let's have a look then at the types of careers that you might find yourself in, and you'll probably get or have already got career advice from lots of people. And one thing they will tell you is when you get a job, you won't necessarily be in that job for a long time. So when I look at this list of, and it's just a partial list of all of the jobs that graduates from the university might have, engineering graduates in renewable energy, actually, I imagine a lot of you would end up going from one to another, back to another. You move around a lot, and there are other career paths that are not listed here. But some of the ones here we've already talked about: solar and wind project development and construction. A lot of jobs already in that space, and a lot more expected. We're only at the tip of the iceberg in terms of this transition from large coal and gas-fired power stations to hundreds and thousands and millions of wind turbines and solar panels being installed across every country. And the photo here, you can see this is a large wind turbine being installed, or having been installed and inspected in Tasmania, like many of the ones that you would see around the world, and perhaps that you've seen in your own country when you've travelled around. Developing smart grid technologies we've talked about, so coming up with the novel ideas and the computer smarts to be able to control all of the different technologies, to have that electric vehicle charging when the wind is blowing or when the sun is shining, for example. Protection systems is something that you probably would not have heard of in the context of electrical power systems, but the reason why the lights stay on is that the system is designed so that if a problem occurs in one place in the system, the whole thing doesn't fall apart. And it's quite an advanced level of engineering required to design a good protection system. And protection systems is not the most exciting necessarily part of electrical engineering, but it's really necessary. And with the system changing, it's becoming more and more advanced knowledge and skills being required to do that. In fact, a protection system engineer is one of the highly sought after jobs because they're extremely highly respected and sought after. Electrical power system and network operations. So once you've built all of these wind and solar generators and perhaps built extra poles and wires or transmission lines to be able to handle all of this power coming from new locations, actually managing and operating the power system is quite a complex piece of work and requires engineers to design that system for operation and then to actually operate the system. And I'm skipping around a little bit, but at the bottom of this list, I've got energy market operations, and I will touch back on this when we talk about the degree itself. But when you study renewable energy and power systems, we want you to understand how those technologies and how that engineering works in a real scenario where, as you probably know, in most countries, it's the market or the price that different generators can bid into a market that determines which ones are operated. And so engineers actually end up needing to understand and even work in energy markets. So that's the more the financial side of things. A few others, I won't read through all of these in the list, but a couple of others that are worth mentioning. So pumped hydro storage. At the moment, there isn't much energy storage in the electrical power systems in the world. So if you have a wind turbine that's producing electricity or power, if it's not being used at that time or doesn't need to be used by a customer, then it's lost. You don't store it. That's going to change hugely over the next 20, 30 years. And most governments and countries are working out how to make that change happen. One of those technologies that will be deployed is pumped hydro storage. And I mention that and give it some extra time because in Tasmania, there is already plans to build large amounts of pumped hydro storage. Hydro power, some of you probably already know, benefits from having very hilly or mountainous countryside. So if you've got water at a high location and you let it run down a steep hill, you can make a lot of electricity. If you pump that water back uphill from excess electricity, let's say from wind or solar, then you can store that energy again and use it later on when there isn't wind or sun. And Tasmania, for those who have done a little bit of research and know something about Tasmania, it's quite a hilly, mountainous state. And so there's a lot of hydro existing now, and there's a lot of fantastic locations to create pumped hydro. Pumped hydro is sometimes referred to as a big battery, and in fact, the project, or one of the projects that is being planned, and actually about the time when you graduate from your degree at the University of Engineering, if that's a University of Tasmania, if that's what you hopefully choose, that project will have kicked off and be underway, and they'll be looking for a lot of engineers. It's called the battery of the nation because the idea is for Tasmania, with all of those steep hills, to create a lot of pumped hydro systems which act as the battery for not just Tasmania, but for some of the rest of Australia. So I think that's probably enough to talk about these careers. I'm happy to take some questions if you see one of those and go, oh, what is that? What is that one that Evan's talking about? But let's move on and look at that degree in Tasmania. So at the University of Tasmania, we have two degrees. We have an undergraduate degree in electrical power. Well, actually, the degree is in electrical power. It's called a specialisation, so it's like a major as part of our Bachelor of Engineering, and all students do a Bachelor of Engineering and then do honours, and the honours in your final year, for a lot of you, will do a project which is quite closely related to an industry problem or application, or even with an industry partner that's supplying input and you're producing outputs that are of value to that industry partner. Also a really great way to get a job if you do that honours project really well. The degree is known as, or specialisation is electrical power, but it is essentially a renewable energy degree. And if you follow the first part of my talk where I said every electrical power system in the world is transitioning, and it's just a matter of when, not if, is transitioning to one that's based on renewable energy, then you'll understand that doing an electrical power specialisation is essentially doing a renewable energy specialisation. You have to understand electrical power systems to be able to design systems based on renewable energy. And there's no point, and we don't teach you electrical power without teaching you about renewable energy technologies and how they fit in to the power system. And in our degree, which I teach a few units within, so a few courses, you'll cover a range of stuff, starting from first year basic electrical systems technology and electrical circuits, through to perhaps the more exciting stuff in the third year and fourth year, where you learn about wind and solar technologies and other renewable technologies, including, but I haven't listed here, tidal energy and wave energy, which there is some research being done in Tasmania at the university on those technologies as well. You'll learn about energy markets. In fact, in a course that I teach, you'll learn about transmission and distribution networks. You'll learn about power systems operation and control. And there'll be a few things that you maybe be surprised at that have to be done to keep the lights on all the time. You learn about how energy storage systems work and how they integrate into a power system. And because we know that in future, and even now there's a little bit of this, but in future electrical power systems will incorporate smart grid technology. We'll need to be able to be incredibly good at predicting when the sun will be shining, when the wind will be blowing, when people will need to use energy. We teach you artificial intelligence or computational intelligence, and we apply it to power systems. And as I said, throughout your degree, you'll, well, I said before, in your honours project, you'll be exposed to real applications. So you'll do a really big project that you'll spend half your time on in that final year with a dedicated supervisor who spends time with you one-on-one. So I supervise several students each year to do a project which is based on a real-world problem or application, and often with an industry partner. But even in your courses, you will do a lot of material that's related to real applications and to industry partners. And certainly in my courses and a couple of my colleagues' courses, you'll do field trips and you go out and see things hands-on and you talk to engineers. This year, for example, my third-year students went into the Tasmanian power system control room and stood next to the operator as they controlled the system. And it was quite exciting at some times when the operator told everyone they had to be quiet while he fixed a problem that had just occurred. And someone else in the company told me that they aren't even allowed to go and stand there and get that experience. So you really will get firsthand real world experiences that you'll struggle to get at other universities or working as an engineer in many organisations. So that's our undergraduate degree. And then we have a master's degree. And really the master's degree at the University of Tasmania it's aimed at giving professional engineers the extra skills that they need to be competitive and really productive in this environment where the power system is changing really quickly. And so I know that we welcome students in who have done, for example, a degree in mechanical engineering or in civil engineering, and now want to specialise and understand electrical power systems and renewable energy. We also have students who've come in and have done an electronics engineering or an electrical engineering degree, but without this level of specialisation, or have done it from a degree in another university and now want to come and work in Australia or some other country where our degree is recognised. And so it's a Master of Professional Engineering degree. And again, the specialisation in this case is called Renewable Energy and Electrical Power specialisation. And this degree is quite special in that it was designed, the design of the degree was led by industry. We ran a lot of workshops with the big players in industry in Tasmania and said, what do you need from specialised graduates? And we sat down together and worked out what those skills and knowledge sets were and what experiences they thought students should have. And we designed what I think is a really outstanding degree specialisation in renewable energy and power systems. Depending on where you come in, and there'll be more details about this online, or you can ask later, or perhaps Mona and others can give you information on, depending on where you come into the degree or what your background was, you'll do some of the units or some of the content that's contained in the units the undergrads do, but then you do some really specialised units in your final year, like energy system modelling. This has really only been research that's done until recently. So teaching it into a degree is, I'd say, relatively unusual, but working out how a country's energy system might change when you transition to renewable energy, and what types of other technologies and how much storage you might need to make that system operate. renewable energy and storage integration into power systems and into markets. And that includes some project finance, understanding how these projects are financed and what conditions they need for an investor to invest in them and get a return on that investment. Advanced network operations. So some of the things I talked about before with electric vehicles, with houses having batteries and smart controllers, having fridges and dishwashers that communicate with the internet. These all present fantastic opportunities, but they also create big problems that need to be solved. And so in advanced networks, we talk about some of those challenges for distribution networks and for the power system, including advanced protection systems. And then in your final year as well, you do a really applied industry-focused research project. And because we will have relatively small numbers of master's students and we've got a very engaged set of industry partners, they are motivated and keen to design projects with us that are really valuable to them and also give our students a fantastic experience that hopefully, I mean, the aim of this program is to create students that industry wants. And as I've said before, the industry in Tasmania is changing at a huge rate, but this is the same all around Australia and all around the world. And so I think, and this takes me to my next slide, that a graduate from this master's degree will be in a really fantastic position to get a great job or have lots of job opportunities in front of them. And so my last slide before I just touch on research, which is something that some of you might also be interested in, that the outlook for graduates generally for renewable energy is really bright. I know because I joined some forums with industry and government that they are worried about whether they will be able to get enough engineers to do all the things that they know is going to need to be done in the next 10 or 20 years. This is why when I first meet new students in my courses, I say, congratulations on choosing this, because it's a really fantastic career pathway, lots of opportunities. And our graduates, University of Tasmania graduates, are highly sought after by energy utilities, by renewable energy developers, by other industries that are linked to the electrical power system or energy system. And this is not just in Tasmania, but in Australia and then all around the world. And our graduates are employed in many Australian energy and electrical power focused organisations. And as I've hopefully given you the idea or impression about already, the number of career paths for qualified engineers with renewable energy expertise at the moment are huge, but they will grow considerably over the years to come. So I can't stress it enough. It's a degree in electrical power, in renewables. It's really going to open up doors for you, create opportunities for you. And then my last slide, I want to talk a little bit about research. So I'm passionate about renewable energy and electrical energy systems. I love teaching it, but also I love doing research in that field because, like in industry with lots of changes happening, there's a lot of research and a lot of research needed. And at the University of Tasmania, we have a small but world-class research group and a centre for renewable energy and power systems research, where we do work on practical problems that are relevant to industry. We work with industry on these problems. Why do we do it? Well, we do it because we are interested in it, but we do it because we want to create knowledge and technology that is going to be needed by industry in the medium to longer term to make the transition to renewables happen. Our research is ranked by the Australian government, which compares research of universities with research all around the world, to be above world standard in this area. Our research attracts considerable industry and government research funding, and is also a great opportunity for interested graduates from our degree and from other degrees, but I'm talking to people, hopefully some of you will come and do your degree here, to go on to a research career by doing a PhD with us. And that's one that I didn't really put on the career opportunities slide earlier on, but doing a PhD, becoming really specialized in a field, gives you additional opportunities both in industry, but also working in research to solve some of these problems that are over the horizon or on the horizon, we sometimes say. So that's about it for me. This last photo I really like. It's not me on the rock, but there's a lot of coastline in Tasmania. So if you like water, which I do, it's one of the reasons I moved here a few years ago, you'll see a lot of it, quite a lot of wind as well. So you see a lot of waves crashing against the coastline. But that's it for me. And now happy to have discussion on anything, open for questions or to be contacted later if you're not sure what to ask now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Evan. That was really informative. And I didn't know too much about this topic myself, even though my father is a former electrical engineer. It was good to hear your thoughts on it. So a few thank yous coming through. There were a few questions, but before I go on to the audience, feel free to pop through any questions you guys have. There's one there already from Sanjay. There are questions coming through, which is great. So I'll just ask Sanjay's question. So Sanjay is asking, what are the relevant Bachelor of Engineering degrees that would be accepted as progression into the Masters? An example you already provided was electrical engineers. Are there any others?
Yes. So we look at each on a case-by-case basis, but essentially any engineer who wants to upskill or change their specialisation would be welcome. We then tailor the degree. I'll give you a quick example. I've got an engineer, a civil engineer, who's just started his Masters 3 weeks ago. And I had a conversation with him in the second week and realised that he'd been given credit for first year units and was starting now with 2 units of mine actually this semester and struggling. And I've directed him back to the program coordinator and said, look, we absolutely want this student to be doing our degree, but we don't want him to struggle by going straight into these units. And so he's now going to go back and I think he's discussing it, but go back and start doing that fundamental unit. And so, yes, civil engineers, mechanical engineers, environmental engineers, all able to come into this degree. You just may have to come in at a different starting point, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does.
And just continuing on from that question. So I guess, because I had a question about the credits, because we get a lot of students who do have Bachelor of Engineering backgrounds, I guess.
Yeah.
So first year, where usually the first year of Masters of Professional Engineering for the audience, usually students tend to get 1 year credit if you do come from an engineering background. I guess in that case for the student, for example, with that 1 year of study, because usually students don't know why it's 3 years of a Masters of Professional Engineering. I guess that 1 year of study, what does it incorporate in terms of units? And I guess, why do students get that 1 year credit and when would they want?
Yes, I have to, I apologise, I should have the units up in front of me, but the first year units are mostly compatible with most other degrees.
Yeah.
A lot of mechanical engineers, for example, their first year, they've done, I'll give you a specific example, they've done first year circuit theory, electrical circuit theory. If you've done that, then you can start our degree from our second year, usually. If you've done a mechanical engineering degree where you've done no electrical engineering, it will just be a struggle to jump straight into the second year. And so it does need to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. You can have a discussion. I'm happy to have a discussion with prospective student about it. But our course coordinator, Ben Miller, is the ideal person to talk to about it. It might be that there's just that one first year unit that you actually could get credit for your first year degree, but we'd recommend you just do that first year unit. Otherwise, it could be electrical engineering can be really quite hard to catch up with if you've fallen behind in some of the basics. Yeah. The other option is so you might be given the first year credit like that other student I talked about, but then find that you're struggling to keep up. The other option is to do some self-study. The first year electrical circuits for a qualified professional engineer should be pretty easy to pick up and get through within a few weeks of your own self-study. But that discussion just needs to be had on a case-by-case basis, I think.
Yeah, fantastic.
Very few students would have to do 3 years to get the master's.
And that's usually the case. So for the attendees, usually that's the case. So a lot of our students do tend to get a year block credit. Most of them generally don't seem to have too many issues, but there are situations where we have to provide, our international admissions team provides a 3-year Masters of Professional Engineering. So it really depends on what specializations, as Evan just mentioned, you've studied and where you are at in terms of your level. There is a question here from Yihan. Could you brief, and I can answer this one, Evan. So could you brief on the scholarships available for this degree? Fantastic. So we do offer our Tasmanian International Scholarship, which is a 25% tuition fee discount. This is available to majority of our courses. So it includes the Bachelor of Engineering as well as the Master of Professional Engineering. This scholarship is available to all international students commencing this degree, regardless of whether you get credits or not. And also we do look at your previous academic studies. So as long as your previous study was a minimum completion of 12 months full-time study, we will look at that and then assess you based on your overall grades. You'll have to show that you're around a 75% out of 100 ATAR, we call it here in Australia. So as long as you're around that range, you should be able to meet the eligibility to get the scholarship. Occasionally, our College of Science and Engineering do offer specialized, specific scholarships for those degrees every now and then. So it's good to keep an eye out on our website, our scholarships website, and I'll pop that link in a second. And you can keep up to date with all of our scholarships that are available at the moment. But at the moment, that's the main one that's available for all of our international students, which covers those 2 degrees. We do have, so Mahmoud has, it's more so, I think, a comment or a statement saying, I wonder for how long we can store energy from the solar system.
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually, Mahmoud. It depends on how much you want to spend, doesn't it, as you probably know. And I think most people at the moment that have a solar system on their roof will buy a battery that can maybe store 3 or 4 hours worth. And you certainly know that you need a lot more storage than that if you only want to rely on battery and storage. So at overall energy system level, people are talking about small amounts of storage to start with, just to help deal with the variability in solar and wind. It can be windy at one point and then half an hour later be really not very windy at all, and then the wind can pick up again. So having a small amount of storage can help, but longer term, we need a long duration of storage. And actually, this is a good plug for the projects that are being proposed in Tasmania. So batteries, generally, you can store for a few hours and it becomes more and more expensive the longer you store it. You just have to buy more batteries. For pumped hydro, which is pumping water up to a lake high up and letting it run back down again, a lot of the cost is not in how much time you store the energy for. That's just a bigger volume of water, but all of the infrastructure pump it up there. And so the opportunity for long amounts of storage, for 12, 24-hour storage for cases where there's long periods of time with no wind and no sun, it starts to really make sense for pumped hydro storage technology. And that's probably what will be needed in the more medium to longer term. It's a great question. And the other thing I should say is those battery technologies are moving so quickly. 5 years ago, even the cost of batteries was so high that no one really seriously thought about using it to store energy from the solar system on the roof, but now we do, and that cost is going to keep changing. And I see, I may as well, while I'm talking, I see a question, another excellent question. I can see that many of you should be coming and doing the master's degree.
Yeah.
It's that would be a good project in itself, actually, for any country. So in Australia at the moment, which is the most economical, solar or wind? I hope this doesn't sound like I'm a politician, but it depends. It depends on where you are, basically. So in Tasmania, which is actually quite sunny, but not as sunny as some other parts in Australia. It's very windy. And so wind energy is the most economical. In fact, potentially some of the cheapest wind in Tasmania, anywhere in Australia or indeed the world. In some parts of Australia, and if some of you do come and, if you're not from Australia and you come and travel to Australia and get to travel, there are some parts of Australia where it feels like it is sunny all the time. And it almost is. And so solar is the cheapest in those locations. The great thing is, as a mix, having some solar over here where it's really sunny and some wind down here where it's quite windy, and a bit of mix up here and over here means that the system can operate more smoothly, because if it's not windy down here, it's sunny up here, or if it's not sunny up here, it's windy over here. It's a great question. We could probably talk about it for a long time.
Wow, that was cool. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way. And yeah, Tasmania is quite windy.
Yeah.
During summer, we do have lots of sun as well. So I can definitely see your point, having a mix of it. But really good questions coming through. If you guys have any more questions like that, where you have general interest and you want to know more, definitely put them through. I had a question, essentially. Oh, we'll go to Jehan's. We would be starting the degree online, correct? That's right. So you'll start your studies online at the moment. Unfortunately, the borders are still closed. I can touch base a little bit on that for the audience. So with the Bachelor of Engineering and the Masters of Professional Engineering, you can definitely start online and just continue your studies online until borders open. At the moment, I mean, it's been closed for a while. Vaccinations are going up slowly. In Tasmania, we haven't had any COVID cases for a very, very long time. Probably almost just under a year, roughly.
Yeah.
I can't even recall the last time we had a COVID case here in Tasmania, but majority of Tasmanians here are getting vaccinated, which is really good news. New South Wales at the moment is full lockdown and the cases are going high over there. So in a way, I think for the audience, if you are an offshore student at the moment listening, who's not aware of the information directly from us. So it all comes down to the federal government, and then the states decide what they potentially want to do. They make their own decisions. So at the moment, there are certain domestic lockdowns happening between states over here. So it's a matter of understanding what our plan is at the moment for that. We are aware that there are international arrivals specifically for international students happening in some states, and New South Wales had their approval recently, as well as South Australia. So in a way, a lot of institutions are sitting back to see what happens. And we are hopefully that if you start your studies online this coming semester, semester 1 next year, that it shouldn't be too long that borders would open. We're hoping sometime next year. We cannot give a guarantee. We don't know when and how that's going to look like, but it is looking hopeful that this could potentially occur sometime next year. So yes, definitely you start your studies online. This is for all of our courses as well, majority of our courses that are available online, but particularly for these two, for sure, you can definitely do that. And there's a big support system around that. So the College of Science and Engineering, so all of our colleges and the College of Science and Engineering, there's a big support system behind that. We have peer-assisted sessions where students can, mingle with other students in the community, student community, and there's all of the professors are there to help the students, if you're not sure about something, because it can be quite difficult studying online for students. So we are completely aware of that, and the professors themselves are completely aware of that as well. So it's done in a way through to making sure that students are managing. We don't want you to fail. We're not setting up students to fail. We don't want that. We want you all to have a positive experience. It's all done through our My Learning Online platform, which is a platform you use to attend your classes. It's all done via Zoom, etc. So all of your materials are online. So that's a little bit about how it kind of looks like studying online. It's quite consistent across all Australian universities, roughly. But essentially everything is recorded. It's there for you. The materials are up, and there is a big support network for you to have that conversation if you're struggling. There are course information officers you can contact, your own academics, professors, tutors, etc. that you can contact. So
yeah, it's not online in a sense that you're just given information to do yourself. It's very much guided, and we really try and include and involve all of our students that are not on campus. And every unit I'm teaching and have for the last while has a mix. I'll give you an example. So power electronics, which is one of the units you do in both the renewable undergrad and the masters, actually. I had a class yesterday in the lab, and one of the groups there, 2 students at the bench, hands-on. The third student on the computer screen was connecting with 2 webcams, and that student actually was the one who had control of the oscilloscope, if you've done any engineering. So the instruments, we had connected it online, and he was able to control that measurement equipment and take images from it and take data from it. It actually worked out really well. I speak, certainly you don't get the same experience, you get a different experience, but I will speak one-on-one to my students who are offshore, just check in and help them with problems they've got with the course material throughout the semester. So you're definitely part of the cohort. You're not forgotten. You're put into groups with students who are here, where we can do, we work with the situation as best as we possibly can. And as Mona said, we actually hope you'd be able to join us on campus fairly soon after you start in 2022 with the way things are going.
Yeah, that's really good information. It just gives an idea to the audience that we do try and support our students as much as possible. I mean, nothing replaces that actual student experience of being on campus, and we are completely aware of that, but we do what we can to support. So that's really good. Another question, could you also touch on the effect of the pandemic on the energy engineering industry? I think you have a future student here.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think it's, so when the pandemic started out, there was, we had some projects, research projects with energy industry partners, and they suddenly dropped everything and were worrying about COVID and how they would deal with it. Once they worked out how to deal with it, how to get their people to work remotely as needed, then things were pretty much back to normal. Certainly from a energy use point of view, there were some countries that saw a reduction in the amount of energy that was used during lockdowns, but that's very much a temporary thing. I think that if anything, it's given governments the chance to accelerate the transition in the energy system, because you probably know that governments are looking to help grow the economy still after the pandemic, or as we come out of the pandemic. And so I think it probably, if anything, would create more opportunities. And one thing is for sure, no matter what happens, people still need energy. It's part of our lives. It makes economies run, and that is not going to change. My view. So the pandemic hasn't had too much of an impact.
Very, very true indeed. Fantastic. A question I had was the accreditation behind those 2 degrees. If you could maybe just touch base on that one a little bit.
Yeah, so both degrees are accredited by Engineers Australia. That is the accrediting body. The master's degree is provisionally accredited because they only accredit it once we have graduates who have gone through the degree and are in the workforce. But it got actually really well complemented by Engineers Australia, the accreditation panel, when they came and did that provisional accreditation. So you are recognised by the peak body of engineers in Australia as an engineer when you come through this accredited degree.
Fantastic. There is a question from Ray. In the Bachelor of Engineering course, students are required to undertake the work placement unit during summer. Can I know where would they usually undertake the work placement unit?
Yep. A huge variety of workplaces. The requirement is to get 12 weeks of engineering work experience. Most will try and get a position at a company that is quite well known, so it'll give them lots of experiences in the field that they want to work in when they graduate. That's what most will do. Some of them are quite competitive, and so there's a process where the third year students put in a proposal or an application for one of these programs for some companies. Location-wise, a lot of students find it a good opportunity to do a bit of travel. So some of my students, one recently was asking me, he'd really like to spend some time surfing in Queensland. Do I have any contacts in some of the engineering companies up there? But no, seriously, it's a good chance to get some other experiences. Some will go and do their work experience in a remote mining town, some in a different city. Some of our students will do their work experience back in their home country if they're an overseas student. I know quite a few students have done their work experience in a Chinese company, for example, when they've gone home for that vacation. No matter what they do, they'll write a report on their experiences, and that has to get approved or passed, if you like. It's a unit where they have to have demonstrated that they've gained that experience as an engineer and reflected on it and learnt from it. So every year I read a bunch of reports that students do from the 12 weeks, and that's why I get to know what some of them have done. But yeah, it's really open. You're given support in finding a work placement, but you're also encouraged to try and find opportunities for yourself that suit you. Hopefully that answers your question, Ray.
Thanks so much. That was really, really insightful. I don't think there's any more questions coming through, and we're bang on at 5 o'clock. So I just wanted to maybe wrap it up there. And thank you so much, Evan. It was really, really lovely hearing you speak, everything about renewable energy. And I really hope we do get potential students come through, like Yihan and Mahmoud, hopefully.
Yeah, come.
We look forward to your application, guys. So, and Evan will know who you guys are if it comes across to him at any point in time. So feel free to pop through applications if you wish. They're open. You can apply for next year anytime. The links that I gave you guys just a while ago, there's a big apply now button on that link. So if you just follow the prompts, it will take you through a registration page. Just put in all your details and then just complete your application. You just submit all of your documents. If you're doing a master's degree, we will need documents showing your previous bachelor degrees, everything else, your English tests, etc. and so forth. So we really look forward to seeing you guys here one day if you're currently offshore, or if you're on the mainland at the moment stuck due to lockdowns. We hope to see you soon. But thanks so much for your time today, guys. It was a pleasure speaking to you, Evan. So everyone have a good night. Thanks for joining.
My pleasure. Thanks. See you, everyone.
See everyone. Bye.